one, again, welcome, and it's great to see everyone here for the new year. Apparently, we're sensing a parting of the Red Sea, like genuinely. We have 8 bold souls to sit in the middle. Is it exactly 8? No, it's 9. So, yeah, a man of honest encouragement. So I have the benefit of knowing the one question 180 in advance. That I won't give you just one thing that I'm excited about. I'll give you 3 things that I'm excited about from the last 7 days. Number 1 is that my wife and I got to enjoy a date night in New Orleans this past Friday. It was super fun. We went to go see a comedian of hers at the Sanger Theater, so it was our first time in the Sanger Theater, which was really cool. It was soaking wet Friday night, which was a challenge, but it was a very fun and memorable evening. The second thing is that I am 1 for 1 on what I would call a touch of a New Year's resolution. I don't really like resolutions, but there is something that I want to see myself grow in consistency in the year ahead, and that is my dear friends Charlie and Chuck, playing basketball with them every single week. This past years, or the past weeks that I've been here so far, some weeks I'll have something else going on, or, I let some things cloud my schedule. But this year, every week that I'm in Baton Rouge, I want to make sure that on Fridays, I'm playing basketball with my boys. And so that's something I want to do 52 out of 52 this year, if at all possible. And then one more is that on Wednesday, something that I'm really excited about is I had a moment in the Bible and in God's presence where it began as the thing that I need to do that's good to do, right? It began as like, we're going to get in God's Word for a minute, have a devotional, have a quiet time, if you will. But it really blossomed into a moment where I heard from the Lord. I did meet with Him. I did have a moment with Him. And it was genuinely exciting. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And as we get into that, we're kicking off a brand new sermon series that we're calling Sweater Weather, the Warm Layers of Neighboring. So I've got 2 things that I kind of want us to go through today. But first, I want to invite you into our Bible reading plan. And so I don't know what you are doing when it comes to reading the Bible on a regular basis. But I'll tell you what we're going to do here at the Vineyard, what we're going to offer as a moment of gathering around God's Word as a community, right? And so we've been doing this pretty much since December of 2022, but this year we're going to have 2 different offerings available to you. And so if you want to be a part of our text reminder, we do use a text service. You can text all of that's underlined at VBR Bible to the number on the screen, and that will sign you up to where what happens every single weekday or every time that we do the reading, it will text you the reading automatically. So you wake up in the morning, and it's right there on your phone. But what I want to tell you about are 3 actual invitations for reading the Bible this year. The first one is what we're going to do from now until Ash Wednesday. So from now until Ash Wednesday, I want to invite us into 2 rhythms. A chapter a day reading, right? And so Monday through Friday, we'll take Saturday and Sunday off just to rest and receive from the Lord in other ways. But from now until Ash Wednesday, on every Monday, we're going to read from Luke chapter 11. And that's where the disciples say, Lord, teach us how to pray. And so God just kind of gave me the idea, how fun would it be if all of us decide on Monday just to read Luke chapter 11, verses 1 through 13 again, to be reminded of that moment where Jesus walks his disciples through what it looks like to pray. And then Tuesday through Friday, we'll step into Joseph's story. So we'll read from Genesis 37 to Genesis 50. When that's done, then we'll jump into John's letters, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. And as we do that throughout the weekdays, we'll find ourselves right at Ash Wednesday. So I want to invite you into the reminder of what Jesus teaches about prayer, the great story of Joseph that we find in Genesis, and then we'll look at John's letters as we get ready for Ash Wednesday. On Ash Wednesday, we're going to launch two, like side-by-side reading plans. One is a Bible in a Year book club. Now, I have never read the Bible from front to back in a year. I have read the whole Bible, but I've never done it front to back in 1 year. And so I'm going to actually kick off a book club on Ash Wednesday to do just that. So if anybody would be like, okay, I'm up for that Pepsi challenge, I'm in, then you can join us on Ash Wednesday. We're even going to do like a Wednesday gathering right here to kind of, it'd be like a legit small group, a legit book club. Let's read the Bible together. And we'll also have our typical one chapter a day weekday reading plan that will continue. As we step into those things, one more thing that I want to put in front of you just for fun is that I want there to be a community element to this. And so whether it's immediate or on the Ash Wednesday launch, I would like for those who are so bold as to step into it is to shoot a short video of you recording the reading for the day. So for example, tomorrow, I will do this. When we send out the text message for tomorrow's reading, I will send out a short video clip of me actually reading Luke chapter 11, verses 1 through 13, so that you can read along with me. But I don't want it to be just me. So if anybody is like, man, that sounds kind of fun, can we see the different faces that belong to the different hearts that are vested in this church family that are reading the Bible together? There's a way for us to access those digital resources that we have at our exposure to be reminded of all that God is doing in our body. So again, the whole reason why we're doing this is genuinely because of what I noticed of what happened in Luke chapter 10 when I was reading this week. And so if you would, that's where we're going to be today. I would encourage you to open up to Luke chapter 10. So I started there, jumped over to Luke chapter 11 because I knew that's where we were going to do for the Bible reading plan. I wanted to read that again. And then jumped over to Luke chapter 12. My eyes were just kind of bouncing around the pages that were there. And the Lord began to connect some dots for me. And so if you would, again, Luke chapter 10, if you have an actual book Bible, it might be a little bit easier for your eyes to jump with mine. But again, I was reading chapter 10. We're going to be in chapter 10 today, then reading through chapter 11. It was over in chapter 12. I just want to read this and let it sit, and then we'll move forward in what we have for our time together here. I was reading in chapter 12, and verse 14, Jesus says, well, we'll go back to verse 13 for context. It says, someone called out from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." And Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware, guard your heart against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." And it was that phrase, that was the moment that it went from I'm having a Bible study devotion to I sensed the Spirit of God say, "Alan, son, beware. Beware, guard your heart against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." And there were connections that began to be made, which we'll talk about today. But as we step into that, I want to put one more phrase in front of you. So, sweater weather, the whole Bible reading thing. I believe God will position us in a way that He has yet to do to date to be a good neighbor in Baton Rouge. When I was asked by the elders to move from Texas to Louisiana, and I also believe by the Lord, I sensed God pointing me to this sentence: we will be a good neighbor in Baton Rouge. If there's a vision that I believe the Lord has for this faith family, it's this sentence right here: we will be a good neighbor in Baton Rouge. And so I wanted to take the next 6 weeks between now and the beginning of Lent to do this sermon series, Sweater Weather, the warm layers of neighboring. And I want us to take 6 weeks to look at all of the relationships that life invites us into. And so today, as we get ready for that, I want to do 3 things. I want to read from Luke chapter 10. I want us to diagram. We're going to do some drawing today, right? And then I have 2 invitations for you to connect with God. So first, let's get right to it and let's read from Luke chapter 10. This is the story of the Good Samaritan, and a great place to rest and then launch for the idea of good neighbor. Let's read together. One day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question. Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus replied, what does the law of Moses say, and how do you read it? And the man answered, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength, and all your mind. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. Right, Jesus told him, do this and you will live. But the man wanted to justify his actions. So he said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied with the story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and they left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. And then a temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. And the next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, please take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. There's a handful of things that I want to unpack today as we look at this, but first, last sentence. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked, and the man replied, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, yes. Now go and do the same. The warm layers of neighboring. So when we think about the relationships that this life invites us into, right? Maybe you've seen this before. Have you ever seen somebody draw up like concentric circles of a relationship, right? So, I mean, for example, just for fun, you've got right there in the center will be a big L for the Lord. I know this is kind of small, but the circle's going to get big. So can everybody see it so far? Right on, good. The next one we see both in the Bible and in our lives. I say in the Bible, when you think about Genesis, Adam had a relationship with the Lord, and then he had a relationship with Eve. And so we can put like spouse as the next closest or next most intimate relationship. After that, you're going to have family. Along came Cain, Abel, and Seth. So then there's family. From there, and this is Alan from this point forward, I like to say personal influence. And by that I mean, these are people that aren't family, but like you spend like personal time with them, right? So they're friends. They're ones that you would call when you got to move, right? They're people that you genuinely are intimate with, right? I mean, that you spend your personal time with them, right? You have personal, so they are a part of your personal influence. Also, you have a voice in their life and they have a voice in yours. The next I would say is public relationship, right? So work, those places where you might even have like some public relationship here. Even in this room, you might think, okay, there are some people that are legitimately in my life and I'm friends with them, right? Like we've had sleepovers at our houses when we were kids. What do you know what I'm saying? Like, and there's also folks that you know just because you go to church with them, right? Public influence. Because of your activity in life. And then there's the last ring of like literally everyone else, right? Strangers and those kinds of things. So we've seen this before, right? You guys have seen something like this before, yeah? A dear friend of mine challenged me at one point to look at this whole thing differently. And I want to put that metaphor and illustration in front of you this morning as we step into this sermon series about layering. And here's why we're embracing, not just because it's, weather that's conducive to, I see some sweaters this morning, I see some long sleeves, it's good. But the layers. My friend put forth a suggestion that instead of them being concentric circles, that they're better looked at as plates or foundations. And so at the bottom, you have God or the Lord. And then atop that plate or atop that foundation, you have, if you are in this relationship, right, a spouse, right? And then on top of that, you have your core family. So like if you are a child, depending upon where you are in leaving the nest, even if you don't have a spouse yet, there's still this family component that sits atop that. And then sitting atop of that, you have your personal influence, your personal relationships, your public relationships, and then everyone else. And what my friend's suggestion was that each is a foundation for the one that corresponds below it. For example, if this is my spouse, my friend's suggestion was if you sense tension in this relationship, go one step lower to see what needs to be attended to here so that it supports here. So if you're sensing a strain in your family relationships, what can you shore up in your relationship with your spouse, right? That would strengthen the foundation of this plate. As we talk about neighboring, though, I'm going to take this a whole new direction for us. And why I think it's important even to draw these things is because I absolutely can see how one might affect the other. I would definitely advocate for, if you have a strong, healthy relationship with your spouse, that absolutely sets forth a beautiful foundation for your children, right? And so on and so forth. But, let's take, for example, if you're single, right, you might have just God, and you've got your personal folk, your public folk, and everybody else, right? But what I want us to see today is, you guys remember those toys that you played with as toddlers? Where like the rings. And the way those things are designed, they actually kind of like screw in right here. As we read from Luke chapter 10, and we see our relationship opportunities, this actually can go way deeper. Here's what I see God inviting us into for the next 6 weeks, if not for the next season of us as a church family. And I like drawing bubbles because it gives you the sense that it's like this awesome, gooey wonderfulness. This is you. We are this space, this cylinder in the center. And for those of us that believe God is who He is and that He offers what He offers, we know our best position is completely submerged, connected, plugged into Him so that the goodness of God, the character of God, the beauty of God can make its way into our lives. And then as the goodness of God begins to make its way into us, instead of them just being plates or just being layers, I begin to see these as channels. And if we have openings, then at any moment, the good things of God can flow up into us like a spring of life, right? And make its way into our relationship with our spouse, make its way into our relationship with our family and our friends and our public influences or public connections and total strangers. In Luke chapter 10, we're encouraged to do three things. Before we even get into the story of the Good Samaritan, we're encouraged to love God, love others, and love ourselves. Love God, love others, love self. I want to, this is like the one thing I want to say today. So like if you are actually taking notes and want to like, okay, this is the one thing I want to give to you today. Loving God, loving others, and loving self is not a mastery of doing, it's a mastery of receiving. Like even when you think about the commandment, what's the greatest commandment? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That is not for me to be, okay, like I've got to love God with all my mind. I've got to, like, that will happen if I receive him. If I understand who God is and the great mercy of God. Like God can look at me in all of my most embarrassing moments, my most failing moments, my most selfish moments, and he can say, I love you, I have mercy upon you, I forgive you, I have a plan and a vision for you to be well beyond that, healed and healing beyond that. When I begin to see God's mercy and love, then I begin to like step into a space where I can love that. But without seeing him, without receiving who he is, then any kind of loving God is just all on my willpower or all on my decision making, or like, okay, I'm going to choose to love God today. I'm going to choose to love God today. I'm trying to think about my favorite tacos. Because if I've tasted my favorite tacos, we will go chips and salsa. My favorite chips and salsa is from Chuy's. It's a Tex-Mex restaurant in Texas, primarily. They may have more elsewhere. But the reason, and I could go on and on about why that salsa is my absolute favorite. One, it's like it's fresh out of the vegetable, cutter, grinder. It's amazing. But I could go on, and I don't have to convince myself or anyone else like why I love it. I know why I love it because I've tasted and experienced it and know it. The same thing is true of our relationship with the Lord. If we find ourselves striving to love him, I would encourage you to pause and receive him. Because that receiving will remind you how easy it is to love him. Now, how does this connect to Luke chapter 10? If we were to look at that story, there are a handful of people. I'm actually just curious, can you name all of the characters that are in the story of the Good Samaritan? Okay, so whoa, hold up. Let's go slow. One at a time. We did say the priest, the robbers, the victim, the innkeeper, the Levite, and the Samaritan. I think we got them all. I think. There's the guy who was going to begin with, the bandits who beat him up. There was the priest who passed him by. There was the Levite who passed him by. There was the Samaritan who rendered him aid. And there was the innkeeper that he was entrusted to. That's right, we got them all. in all of these relationships over the course of the next 6 weeks, we're going to begin to uncover how we can either be a bandit and be selfish. I'm writing this in this space because it's all the space that I have left. Option 1 is bandit, to rob and take or be selfish. The next one is to bypass. And then finally, to bandage or render aid. Yea, they all begin with B. I still have a heritage of baptism. Baptism. Or we rob and we disregard and we restore. A couple of things just for fun, though, when you begin to look at this. If you have no relationship with God, right? If you have no relationship with God whatsoever, but you are married, let's put another one over here. And so, like, your bottom rung of connection and relationship is here. You will potentially, by default, begin to draw from this relational space. So even if your spouse is drawing from the Lord, there's like this, you begin to see what happens there. Can any couples testify that when we both have those seasons where we're planted in here and we're drawing out and we're drawing and we're giving into the space that God has provided for us relationally, what this can begin to fill and look like and be enriched or be full? Right? Loving God means like what he has down here I need, and I need it more than anything else in the whole wide world. Loving others means that I am loving myself enough to get whatever gunk is in my way out of the way, confessed or cleansed, so that I am free to flow. Right? And then there's the whole boundary thing too, right? I mean, like, being a good neighbor is also knowing, like, when to say no. Because think about, like, your work relationships, family, friends, work. So if work really begins to crowd this pipe or push in, right? We have the responsibility of loving God, loving ourselves, and loving others in a way that allows his wellspring of life to flow into every relational connection of our life. Bandit, bypass, or bandage. I don't like bandage, but it's in the Bible. It is there. I do like rob. Am I in a selfish relationship? The bandits went to that dude, took what they wanted, beat him up with no regard for him, but complete regard for self. Took what they wanted and left. Not a good neighbor. The Levite and the priest, for whatever reasons, passed him by, right? Or plugged it up, right? So, like, I don't know, how many of us have had opportunity somewhere, whether it's in our marriage or with our kids, probably more likely if they're adult kids, but you know what I'm saying, or even with a friend or someone at work, where we begin to say, man, I'll receive from the Lord, but I ain't giving it to you. Right? We'll bypass them. Again, I know the goodness of, like, what does it look like to receive from him and then share that restoration that we are receiving in the relationships that life gives us to do it. Well, I got to be so close. We have a new mic ordered. We have had a new mic ordered for anyone who wants to know about that, but there's also the holidays and deliveries, and so there's just a very tiny thing right back here that if I move the wrong way, but it's getting fixed. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be cool. what I believe the Lord is inviting us into is this idea of receiving from him and allowing that restoration to fill us up and to fortify us so that when we are then a vessel to fortify others.